Hi everyone, welcome to my channel, Abby the Food Scientist. I'm Abby and I have a wonderful guest here today. This is Bianca McVaugh. Hi Bianca.
Hi Abby, thanks so much for having me.
Yes, I'm very excited to talk to you. So you are currently the Director of Research and Development at Harris Tea Company, but what I want to pick your brain on is actually an experience you went through several years ago now. And I've gotten so many questions from students asking, if you don't have a background in food science, can you pursue a master's degree or even PhD in food science? And I know this is something you went through, right?
Yes, correct. My bachelor's degree is actually in biology, and I did not even know food science existed until after I graduated with my bachelor's.
Right. So do you remember how you even found food science?
Yeah, so it was actually just a random conversation. I was lucky enough, well, I don't know about lucky, but after my bachelor's, I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. So I was working at a lab technician at my undergrad university. And so I was still very much in an academic environment and talking to professors a lot about my job, about my future, but also just I don't know, day-to-day conversations.
Yes.
And I remember one professor I was talking to mentioned his son's friend went into food science, and it wasn't even I don't even know what the rest of the conversation was about. It wasn't about food science, but he just mentioned food science. And I was like, ooh, what is that? That sounds really interesting. Let me look that up.
Wow. So it was actually, I just interviewed another food scientist, and she said almost a similar story. She just had a conversation with someone who mentioned food science existed, and they're like, you should check it out.
Yeah.
And that is how she found food science as well. That's crazy. So once they mentioned it, did you just research it yourself, or what did you do?
Yeah, I really don't remember a lot between that conversation and me applying to grad school, but I think I probably would have looked it up and looked at programs and realized that this is a real field. This is there, there's degrees in this field of food science. And just started looking up the, what kind of jobs are out there, what does the field really entail. I kind of knew I wanted to go into grad school to specialize, but like I said, I wasn't sure what yet. So I did kind of look to see what the grad school path in food science would look like, and just started doing some research on the field and what kind of jobs it has.
Right. No. And what's kind of funny in your situation is I think the college you went to for your bachelor's degree wouldn't have even had food science.
No, I went to a really small liberal arts school. Right. It was, I want to say, around 3,000 undergrads. There was very few grad students. We had one tiny grad program.
Oh, really?
It was only in education, and there was only ever 3 students a year.
Oh,
so
wow. Yeah.
We're talking tiny. Granted, they had great science programs, but it was biology, chemistry, biochemistry, physics. It wasn't anything really specialized that you would find at a big agricultural university.
Right, which is where you ended up, and where you and I met is at University of Wisconsin-Madison. Do you remember, did you apply to multiple grad schools, or were you really looking at just Madison?
I did apply to multiple grad schools because I was from the East Coast. And a lot of my friends and family are on the East Coast. I did not really want to go all the way to the West Coast. So I limited my search to East Coast and Midwest. But I did apply to a handful of grad schools. In speaking with a lot of people, I learned very quickly that in science for grad school, it's not just sending off an application. You actually have to make some connection with professors and look to see what professors are at that school, what research they're doing. So I was sending emails to professors and trying to make connections that way. But I did apply to at least 5 or 6 schools, I think.
Oh, wow. Yes. Yeah. So no, you were open to several places. And so you end up going for your master's degree to UW-Madison. And can we compare? So that is where I met you. So I had a bachelor's degree in food science. You had a bachelor's degree in biology.
Yeah.
For doing your master's in food science, did you have extra requirements or anything like that?
So that was one of the things when I was like first looking up the field is do I even have the prereqs to do this? Like, do I have to have an undergrad in food science to do a master's? And I pretty quickly realized that I did not. A lot of the prereqs were very general science requirements that most of which I already had, biology, chemistry. I don't remember all of them, but I remember going through the list being like, okay, I think I have most of these. I do think there was one class that I didn't have, which was biochemistry.
Okay.
That I just ended up taking it in grad school. So who ended up being my advisor, she was not concerned about it, and
she's a dog.
Sorry about that.
He's just getting comfy. It's fine.
She was not worried about it at all, and she was like, just take it when you're here. So that was one. And then microbiology, I don't think it was a requirement, but coming from biology and like having done some research on the field and realizing that microbiology is like a big kind of sector of food science, I wanted to make sure I had a microbiology course. So because I was lucky enough to be at a university, I actually took microbiology like while I was working as a lab tech and kind of just like checked that box.
Yes.
But I don't think that was required at all.
No, that makes sense. And honestly, biology as a bachelor's degree, I feel like it's a great setup for food science. Like you said, I think the difference, at least at UW-Madison, between a biology degree and food science is like two different prerequisites. Like you said, you take all the same science classes.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like if you were coming from a non-science background, you may have a little bit more to catch up on. You may want to, take some summer classes or evening classes just to take some of those basic science if you haven't taken those. But if you're coming from any science background, you more than likely already have what you need.
Yeah, I think so. Like any biology, food science, obviously chemistry probably has the same things, like any basic science. You're doing the same prerequisites as everyone else.
Right.
Yeah. And once you were in the program for your master's degree, I feel like you might have had to take some extra classes. Do you remember this?
So I definitely had to take all the basic food science classes that the undergrads take. So the basic food microbiology, food chemistry, food processing,
manufacturing?
I think it was. What?
Was it manufacturing, food manufacturing maybe? Oh, I'm trying to remember.
Yeah, maybe it was food manufacturing. I remember there was 3 basic food science classes that I had to take with the undergrads. And like I said, I ended up having to take biochemistry. I took another statistics course. But it really wasn't, I didn't feel like I was taking so many classes to catch up on something that I hadn't, that I was behind on. It didn't feel that way at all.
Overall, did you ever feel like you were behind compared to anyone else in like our cohort of people starting graduate school, or was it like pretty easy to like catch up, if you want to call it that?
I think it was fairly easy to catch up, again, because so many of the food science, basic food science courses, like if you have that science foundation, you're going to understand the food science. I do think chemistry was probably where I struggled a little bit, only because it had been so long since I had taken chemistry or an organic chemistry. So I think it was probably 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
So you forget some of that chemistry in there. So that was the only part where I struggled a little bit. And really there was a few of us in the same boat. Like I really was not the only grad student taking these courses. There was at least half a dozen of us.
Yes.
And we had a nice little cohort and would study together and, go to, if we really didn't understand something or remember something, the professors were always available. And so I really didn't feel like I was completely behind. It was just a little bit like, let me remember how to do this.
Yes. Yes. Now let me get back into like school and how that goes and that sort of thing.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
wasn't like a constant feeling of like, oh, I'm different than everyone else, or like, oh, I don't know this. Like,
Oh, not at all. The
yeah,
only place where I felt like a little behind is just the not having had the opportunities, the like extracurricular
yeah,
opportunities that a bachelor's in food science may have afforded me,
yeah,
like the clubs and the internships. So I
yes,
felt a little bit behind in that, but in the academic
right.
piece of it, it was a pretty easy transition.
Right. Yeah. No, I totally get like the students that do food science undergrads, like they usually have like 2 internships at food companies and they were like food science club president. But beyond that, like you said, it was, you could fit in right away. It wasn't like you were like thrown way behind or anything.
Sure. Yeah, correct.
So do you think overall, like the transition from biology to food science for your master's degree was like pretty smooth, or was it difficult?
I think it was pretty smooth. I think I had pretty early on consciously made that decision that because I have a biology background,
Right.
food microbiology was going to be the easiest bridge for me
Mhm.
into the field, but also what I understood the most, like going into going into a master's planning to do like food chemistry research, it wouldn't have been as good of a fit. Like I said, I didn't remember a lot of that. If
Yes.
I had been a chemistry major, yes. So going, my research project was in microbiology. I had just taken microbiology to kind of give me that leg up, and I really felt like it was I did not feel like I was hindered by having
Right.
only had a biology
Yes.
degree.
Yes. No, I think that's a good point, is that if you do come from outside food science, understanding like the different sections of food science can be very helpful, because like you said, one of them might make more sense for you or come more easily, like be a easier transition. Absolutely. Because you ended up in food safety, like my master's degree work was, totally different, more like food engineering. So that might have been a little more difficult depending on your background.
And yeah, and to add to that, just because I did food micro for my master's, I'm not doing food micro now, right?
Right.
So I think another important piece to like share is your research project in grad school for at least a master's
Mhm.
does not have to constrain you for what you do after that.
Yes. No, I think that's such a good point, because your first job after getting your master's degree was not in anything related to microbiology, right?
Right. I wanted to do product development. A lot of people want to go into product development, right? It's not the only thing you can do, but it's kind of like the fun part of
Mhm.
food science. And just having that master's in food science and having the experience of doing a thesis,
Yeah.
it's more about the actual content but it's not about the actual content, but more about the skills you learn doing it.
Yes. Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think that's something people think it's like, oh, your research topic is really important. And at the time it might be, but really it's like you're learning to become an independent scientist, and your writing skills are improving and your communication skills. And those apply to any, food science job.
Mhm. And
Yeah.
a lot of the job itself you have to learn on
Yeah.
the go. You have the background knowledge now in food science. You have the tools to think analytically and solve problems.
Yeah.
But I don't, having food microbiology background is helpful in a lot of what I do day to day, but it's not the only thing I do day to day. It's just like a small part of it.
Yes, yeah. Because was your first job after your master's degree was with Harris Tea Company, where you are now, but did you have the title of product developer, or what was your initial role?
I think it was associate scientist,
Okay.
but it was basically product developer.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
So like even then, and now in your current role, microbiology is maybe just a tiny part, or do you do any microbiology?
We don't do our own microbiology.
Okay.
Like all the microbiology testing that we do gets sent to third-party labs.
Yeah.
But just understanding how microbes
Mm.
behave and how they grow and what kind of environment they need to thrive and how to keep products safe. Just having that theory is, and then using that to interpret results. You know, we have a QA department, we have a compliance department. They do a lot of that, but I am often like roped into different projects and different things like that. And so I very much am often involved in those types of projects where microbiology may come up as a topic or a question.
Right. No, absolutely. I feel like no matter what food product you work with, probably understanding microbiology is a very valuable skill.
Yes.
Yeah. No, so I guess overall, like transferring into food science for a higher degree, for you, it's a big recommend for people, or what do you have to say?
Yeah, I would definitely recommend it if you know you're interested in food science. I wanted a field that was more applied than just doing like straight research and pipetting, right? So, and pipetting is just an example of like sitting at the lab all day, like, you know, like
Right.
buried in your lab notebooks. And I wanted something with a little more application, real world application, a little more fun. And I love food. I've always loved cooking. So
Yeah.
as soon as I kind of found the field, I was like, this is what I want to do. And I have to say the master's was a really great way to do that. I didn't have a lot of trouble transitioning. I don't think it's a hard transition if you don't have that food science background and if you feel like you're going to be behind. There's a lot of people who go into food science who don't have a food science background. I want to say, I mean, I don't remember everyone in our cohort, but probably a third to a half of them were in all those entry level classes with the undergrads. It was not uncommon at all. So yeah, definitely recommend. PhD may be a bit different. You're really right. I think it's definitely possible. It's the same thing for all the prereqs and things like that apply. Obviously, I think there's bigger questions whether, you know, like master's or PhD, which is for me, that's a whole different topic. Yeah. But I think transitioning into a grad school program, not having a food science background, I would definitely recommend it if you're a little worried about it.
Yes, no, I love it. I was glad to get to talk to you about this because I mean, I have heard your experience and we have other friends that have done this, but it's always best to go to the source. So I wanted, so you don't just get it directly from the source. What was it like?
Yeah, of course.
And I have one last question I'd like to ask everyone. And this is, do you have any piece of advice or what do you wish you would have known when you were a food science student?
I guess piece of advice, especially coming from my background, which is not in food science, I would say as soon as you're in that food science program, get involved in whatever you can. And I'm not saying I was the best at this because I don't think I got involved in anything I could, but I definitely think I tried to put myself out there. Join the food science club. You know, like any sort of little groups or activities, whether it's, you know, a job shadow or if it's I don't know, there was all sorts of events constantly going on, you know, like little educational activities for the local community, job fairs, even if you're not job searching, just going to network and talk to people. A lot of, you know, Wisconsin was a big school, so employers would come recruit. So even the year before I graduated, before I was even looking for a job, I was going to those to try and understand like what they're looking for and what the jobs are like. And then internships, I think in the food science world, those are huge. And I never got to do one. The timing just didn't work out. My research was over the summer. But I would say if you can do an internship, definitely go for it. I wish I had. Obviously, again, I feel like I'm a good example of like, it can work out even if you don't do these things. But that would be my advice. If I could go back is what I would do.
No, I was just thinking that because people worry, like always worry about themselves. Like I didn't have an internship. I don't have a background in food science, but you are a great example that you can make it work with what you have, right? You don't have to do everything, but you probably have to do a lot.
Right.
no one's perfect.
Right. Exactly.
Yes.
You do the best you can. And at the end of the day, it's your skills and your soft skills that matter.
Honestly, yes. Yeah, I agree. I think that's a great piece of advice. Bianca, thank you so much for sharing your experience. I know this will help a lot of people.
No worries. This was really fun to kind of talk about and remember.
Yes.
What were the prereqs I had?
I know, like now it's really like you got to go back pretty far in the brain.
Yes. I know. But yeah, definitely recommend. Great field to be in.
Obviously, I agree. The most amazing field. But awesome, Bianca. Thank you so much. And I'll talk to you later.
Thank you, Abby.
Bye.
Bye.